Don't open that envelope, the event photographer whispered, grabbing my sleeve so hard the camera bag swung against my arm. Not here, not in front of him. I almost pulled away. It was my 70th birthday. 200 people were waiting inside that banquet hall. My son was about to give a toast. And a woman I had never met was telling me to stop walking. But I looked at her eyes, and I didn't pull away. 10 minutes later, standing in a coat closet behind the kitchen, I heard something that made my legs give out. This wasn't a birthday celebration. It was the last night someone planned for me to be alive. Before I go any further, I want to ask you something. Take a second and leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I read every single one, and I want you to know, while this story carries deep emotional truth and real lessons I learned the hard way, some details have been shaped to protect privacy. Now let me take you back to that night. I woke up on the morning of my 70th birthday the way I'd woken up every morning for the past 4s, alone. The other side of the bed was smooth, undisturbed. Loretta had been gone since the winter of 2020, taken by a stroke that gave us no warning and no goodbye. One evening she was laughing at a television program with her feet tucked under her on the couch. The next morning she was gone. 4 years. 4 years of learning how to make coffee for one, how to eat dinner at a table that seats 6, how to walk through a house that still smells faintly of her perfume on certain quiet mornings and not fall apart. I sat up slowly. 69 had arrived without ceremony. 70 felt different, heavier somehow, more final. Not in a morbid way, more like standing at the edge of something and knowing you can't go back. I walked to the window. The backyard of the house where I'd raised my children spread out below me, the garden Loretta planted still alive somehow despite my complete inability to tend it properly. A neighbor boy came over once a week because he said she used to give him lemonade and he wanted to keep her roses going. I never asked him to, he just showed up. That morning I made myself a promise. Enjoy today, let your family celebrate you, stop overthinking everything. I didn't know then what that promise would cost me. By noon the house was full. My daughter Wren had driven up from Nashville with her husband and the twins. My college roommate Bax had flown in from Phoenix with his wife Donna. Old colleagues, neighbors, people from the church Loretta and I attended for 30 years. They filled every room with noise and warmth, and the particular chaos of a family that actually likes each other. And then there was my son, Elliot. My son had called me 3 days before to say he was bringing someone, a woman he'd been seeing seriously. He said her name was Priya, that she was incredible, that I was going to love her. He said it with the kind of energy he hadn't had in years, bright, certain, wide open. It made my chest ache in the best possible way. After his divorce, I'd watched him close himself off slowly, like a door being pulled shut from the inside. And now suddenly this. They arrived together around 1 o'clock. Elliot was 42, graying at the temples in a way that made him look distinguished rather than old. He walked in holding Priya's hand, and when he introduced her to me, he was smiling the way he used to smile as a kid. Full face, no reservations. Priya was poised, beautiful in an effortless way. She looked at me directly when she shook my hand and said, "Elliot talks about you constantly. Everything he is, he says it came from you." It was exactly the right thing to say. I told her she was very kind. She squeezed my hand once before letting go. Something made me watch her after that. Not suspicion, I didn't have a name for it yet. More like a radio frequency just slightly off, a sound you can almost hear but can't quite locate. I brushed it aside. Every father feels this. The venue was a lakefront event space outside of town that Wren had rented and decorated herself. White string lights over the water, round tables with navy linens, a 4-piece jazz band that played the kind of music Loretta and I used to dance to in the kitchen on Saturday mornings. Wren had framed photos from across my life and arranged them along one wall. Me at 30, in front of the hardware business I'd started from nothing. Me and Loretta at our 25th anniversary. Elliot and Wren as children on the porch of this same house. I stood looking at those photos for a long time. Loretta should have been here. She would have been the one organizing everyone, directing the caterers, making sure my brother-in-law had found the vegetarian option, and that the elderly neighbors near the back had somewhere to sit down. She would have given a speech that made everyone cry, and then immediately made everyone laugh. She would have looked at Priya the way only mothers can, kind, welcoming, and reading every single thing beneath the surface. I was good at building things. She was good at understanding people. I should have trusted that instinct more. I should have asked harder questions. The party moved into the main room around 6. The jazz band shifted to something livelier. People filled the dance floor. Someone pressed a glass of bourbon into my hand. Bax found me near the windows, and we stood together the way we have for 40 years. Easy, quiet, saying more with our silences than most people say with words. "You look tired," he said. "I'm fine. You look like a man who's been carrying something." I told him I was fine. He didn't press it. Bax never presses. It was near 8 o'clock when I slipped out to the terrace for air. The lake was dark and still. the lights from the venue reflected on the surface in long yellow ribbons. I leaned against the railing and let myself breathe for the first time all day. "Mr. Beaumont?" I turned. A woman stood a few feet away. She was wearing the uniform of the event staff, black pants, white button-down, but she had a camera bag hanging from her shoulder and a second camera in her hand, the photographer. I'd seen her moving through the crowd earlier, quiet and quick, the way good photographers work, always slightly outside the moment they're documenting. "Can I help you?" I asked. She stepped closer. Her jaw was tight. She glanced over her shoulder before speaking. "I need you to listen to me very carefully," she said, "and I need you to keep your voice down." My chest tightened. "What is this about?" "Your son," she said, "and the woman he brought tonight. I don't remember deciding to follow her. I just remember moving." She led me through a service door at the back of the terrace, down a narrow stairwell that smelled of cleaning supplies and old wood, and into a small coat room behind the kitchen. Catering staff moved past the door without looking in. The sound of the party filtered down through the ceiling, muffled laughter, the distant thud of a bass note. "Stay quiet," she said, "please." My heart was going so fast I could hear it. "Who are you?" I asked. "My name is Celeste Marrow," she said. "I was hired to photograph tonight. But I've been watching something happen since I got here at 4 o'clock, and I can't leave without telling you." "Tell me what?" She cracked the door open slightly. "Just listen." Through the narrow gap, I heard voices in the hallway just outside. Two people, close together, speaking low. One was a man I didn't recognize. The other was Priya. "You sure he didn't notice anything?" the man asked. "He shook my hand and smiled," Priya said. Her voice was different out here, lighter, easier, like she'd taken off a costume. "He didn't notice a thing. He's exactly what Elliot described. And the paperwork. Elliot already signed the trust amendment. Didn't even read it closely. He was too excited about bringing me tonight." "What about the father's estate?" A pause. "Once Elliot inherits," she said, "we handle it. Same structure, different timeline. His father's estate alone is worth close to $3 million. The business adds another 2 on top of that. And if the old man makes trouble..." Her voice dropped slightly, but I heard every word. "He won't," she said. "He's 70 years old and he lives alone. Nobody's going to question a health decline. Elliot will be devastated. He'll need me. That's exactly where I need him." The man laughed softly. "You're something else. We're close," she said. "Don't mess this up." Their footsteps moved away. Celeste closed the door. For a moment I couldn't speak. The sounds from the party upstairs felt very far away. $5 million, trust amendment, health decline. Elliot will need me. "How long have you known?" I finally managed. "I saw them together before the event started," Celeste said quietly. "In the parking lot, I was unloading equipment. They were arguing. She was coaching him on something. I couldn't hear it clearly. But then I watched her all evening, the way she talks to people at this party versus the way she was in that parking lot. Different person." She paused. "I've photographed a lot of events. I know how people behave when they think no one's watching. She's performing." I leaned back against the wall. My legs felt uncertain. "The man she was talking to," I said. "Do you know him?" "I saw him arrive about an hour ago. He's been staying outside near the parking area. He's not a guest." I pressed my hands flat against the wall behind me. Elliot had signed something without reading it, a trust amendment. My son, who had spent 2 years rebuilding himself after a brutal divorce, had met this woman 6 months ago and was already signing documents. "I need to think," I said. "I know," Celeste says. "I'm sorry. I didn't know how else to tell you." I looked at her. "Why tell me at all? You don't know us." She was quiet for a moment, then, "My father is 73. He lives alone since my mother passed. If someone saw something happening around him and didn't say anything..." She stopped. "I'd want them to say something." She reached into her camera bag and pulled out a business card, pressed it into my hand. "If you need anything, a statement, whatever I can do." I stared at the card. "Go back upstairs," she said. "Smile, don't let her know you heard. And then figure out what you're going to do." She opened the door and was gone. I stood in that coat room for a long time. Upstairs, the band started playing something slow. Someone was laughing. I could hear Ren's voice, her big, easy laugh that sounds just like Loretta's. And underneath it, the gentle current of 200 people celebrating what they thought was a happy night. 10 minutes ago, I had been standing at a railing, thinking about how proud I was of my son. Now I was standing in a coat closet, trying to understand that the woman he loved was sitting upstairs, calculating the timeline of my decline. I couldn't walk back in there and confront her. She'd deny everything. Elliot would be blindsided and angry, and he'd choose her because that's what you do when you're in love, and your father is the one raising the alarm. I would look like a grieving widower who couldn't let go. I would lose my son. I forced my breathing to slow. I straightened my jacket. I went back upstairs. Elliot found me near the bar 10 minutes later. He was glowing. I hadn't seen him look like this since before the divorce. Open, trusting, fully present. He put his arm around my shoulders and told me this was the best night. I smiled. I told him it was, and I hated myself for every second of it. I called my attorney the next morning. His name was Martin Presley, and I'd known him for 22 years. He answered on the third ring, and I told him I needed to see him that day. He said I sounded the way people sound when they're trying not to sound frightened. He cleared his lunch hour. I told him everything. The coat room, Priya's voice in the hallway, the mention of a trust amendment Elliot had already signed, the man in the parking lot. Martin sat across from me and listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he opened his laptop with the particular calm of a man who has heard terrible things many times and learned not to waste energy on shock. Let's start with Elliot's trust, he said. It took less than 30 minutes to find what she'd done. Elliot had established a revocable trust 4 years ago, standard structure, nothing unusual. 6 weeks after he started seeing Priya, he had amended it to add her as a co-beneficiary on certain assets. The amendment was filed cleanly, professionally. Someone who understood estate documents had written it. Not a lawyer Elliot knew, an attorney from a firm I'd never heard of, based in a city 2 states away. Martin turned his screen toward me. This is structured to survive a separation, he said carefully. If they were to marry and later divorce, depending on how things were timed, she could retain a portion of these assets. She doesn't want a divorce, I said. She wants a death. Martin looked at me steadily. Tell me why you believe that. I told him again about the hallway conversation. The phrase health decline, the phrase nobody's going to question it. He was quiet for a long moment. That's not evidence, he said. That's testimony. Yours I know. If you go to Elliot with this right now, what happens? I already knew. He defends her. She finds out I'm suspicious. And then whatever they're planning accelerates. Martin nodded slowly. So what do you want to do? I want to know who she really is, I said, before I do anything else. He gave me a name, an investigator he'd worked with on a business dispute years before. Careful, thorough, discreet. I called her from the parking garage outside Martin's building. Her name was Faye Okafor. She answered like someone who doesn't waste sentences. Tell me what you need, she said. I told her. The full story, start to finish. When I finished, she was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. I'll call you Wednesday, she said. 2 days. Don't do anything before then. I didn't sleep much those 2 days. I drove past Elliot's apartment once, which I am not proud of. I sat in my kitchen in the evenings and talked to Loretta's photograph the way I'd been doing since she died. Not praying exactly, more like reporting in. Telling her what was happening and waiting to feel something shift. I told her I was scared, not for myself, for Elliot, for the look on his face at the party when he put his arm around my shoulders. That look of a man who believes something good has finally arrived. Faye's email came Wednesday evening, password protected, with a file attached. Priya Nair was not who she said she was. The woman Elliot knew had a master's degree from a university in Virginia, a career in financial consulting, a clean record, that Priya Nair existed. But the woman in Elliot's life had borrowed pieces of that identity carefully enough to pass casual scrutiny and built a different architecture beneath it. Her real name was Priya Valancourt. Born in Ohio. 2 prior relationships, both with men over 50, both men of significant means, both ending with those men suffering what their families later described as unexplained health episodes. No charges had ever been filed. In the first case, the man had survived, but his family had been pressured into a settlement that kept them quiet. In the second, the man had died. His adult children had raised questions with local authorities that went nowhere. The man in the parking lot at my birthday party was her brother, Rowan Valancourt. He had 2 prior convictions, one for fraud, one for forgery. At the bottom of Faye's report was a note in plain language. I've done this work for 16 years. This is not ambiguous. She is a predator. Your son is a target. Move carefully. I sat in the kitchen for a long time after reading that. Then I called Martin, and I called Celeste Marrow, and I asked them both if they were willing to help me. They both said yes. Thursday I had lunch with Bax. He was still in town, staying with a cousin, and he came to the house, and I made sandwiches, and I told him everything. He didn't say anything for a while. What do you need? He finally asked. I need someone who can be nearby when I talk to Elliot, someone he trusts. In case I can't hold it together, I'll be there. I might lose him over this. You might, Bax said. But you'd lose him a different way if you said nothing. I called Elliot that evening and asked if he wanted to come by Saturday. Just dinner, I said. Just us. I told him I wanted to talk about a few things while we had some time. He said sure, sounded a little careful, the way you do when your father says he wants to talk. Saturday came gray and cold. I made chili because it was the meal I'd made on every significant occasion of Elliot's life. His first home game, the night before he left for college, the day his divorce was finalized. He walked in at 6, and the smell hit him before I said anything, and something in his face softened. We ate slowly. He told me about a project at work, something he was proud of. I asked questions and listened, and let myself just be there with my son for a little while longer, because I didn't know what the next hour would bring. After the dishes were cleared, I set my coffee down and looked at him. I need to tell you something about Priya, I said. The softness left his face immediately. Dad, please listen all the way through. He set his jaw. This is about you not being ready. Her name isn't what she told you. That stopped him. I told him everything. The coat room, the conversation I'd overheard, Faye's report, the two men before him, the brother in the parking lot, Martin's analysis of the trust amendment. I laid it out as clearly as I could, as gently as I could, watching my son's face move through something I didn't have a word for. Not quite disbelief, not quite anger, something harder than both. When I finished, the kitchen was very quiet. Let me see it, he said. I handed him the folder. He read slowly, turned each page as if testing whether it was real. When he got to the section on the prior relationships, the men who'd gotten sick, his breathing changed. He set the folder down. She told me the trust amendments was standard, he said quietly. She said her financial consultant recommended it for couples in serious relationships. To simplify things in case, he stopped. In case one of us got sick, he said. He said the words like he was hearing them for the first time. I waited. The lawyer, he said. I didn't know him. She said it was routine. I didn't. He closed his eyes. I didn't read it. I trusted her. I know. How did I not see this? It wasn't a question. It was the sound of a man rearranging everything he thought he knew. I said what I'd needed someone to say to me after Loretta died, when I couldn't see past the grief. You saw what she showed you. That's not the same as being foolish. She's done this before. She knows how to be exactly what someone needs. He was quiet for a long time. What do we do? He finally asked. That depends on what you want, I said. We can go to the police now with what we have. We can also get more, make sure it holds. He looked at the folder again, then at me. I want her to face consequences, he said. His voice was very flat. Real ones, not a quiet ending where she moves on to someone else. I nodded. Then we do this carefully. We called Martin that night. Martin called Faye. Faye had already been in contact with a detective at the county level, a woman named Stead, who worked financial crimes and had been looking for a clean thread to pull on Priya Valancourt for 2 years. Someone in the second case had filed a report that went cold for lack of evidence. This time there would be evidence. The plan was not complicated, but it required Elliot to do something very hard. He had to go back. He had to go back to Priya and act as if nothing had changed. I watched my son sit at my kitchen table for a long time that night, working through it. He was quiet in the way he'd been quiet at 8 years old when he was thinking something through seriously, chin down, eyes not quite focused, very still. She's going to expect things to progress, he said finally. She's going to want us to move in together. She's mentioned it twice. Let her think it's happening, Martin said. We need her confident, and if she figures it out, then we move sooner, Faye said. But she won't. She's patient. Patience is her method. Elliot looked at me. Are you okay being part of this? She mentioned you specifically. The health decline. If we let her believe she's winning. I've been running a hardware business since I was 28 years old, I said. I've outlasted 3 recessions, a fire that took out my main warehouse, and your mother's request that I learn to cook. I can handle this. He almost smiled. Not quite. Okay, he said. Tell me what to do. The next 3 weeks were the strangest of my life. I played the part of a father in slow decline. Nothing dramatic, just the quiet accumulation of small signs. I mentioned fatigue. Elliot told Priya I'd seen a doctor who was monitoring something. I skipped a family dinner at Wren's house, which I never do. Bax called twice and I let the calls go to voicemail, which I also never do. We made sure these things filtered back to her. She came to visit me once during this period. Brought soup. Sat in the living room and asked me careful questions about how I was feeling, about whether I'd thought about getting a second opinion, about whether the business was becoming too much for me at my age. She held my hand when she left. I kept my face warm and tired and grateful. Faye had installed a small recording device in the living room, with my full knowledge and consent. Detective Stead had a warrant. The conversation with Priya and Rowan that we captured the following week in the driveway. She hadn't noticed Faye's second camera on the motion-activated porch light was clear. Timestamps, full audio, both voices. They discussed the timeline. They used the phrase the original plan twice. Rowan mentioned a contact who could source something that wouldn't flag a standard talk screen. Martin listened to the recording and didn't say anything for a moment. That's enough, he said. It happened on a Thursday afternoon. Detective Stead arrived at the house I shared with my son. Elliot had moved in with Priya 2 weeks earlier, part of the plan, with 2 other officers. Elliot met them at the door. He let them in. Priya was in the kitchen. I wasn't there. They had asked me not to be. Elliot told me later that she was calm at first, asked for her attorney, maintained the composure she'd built for 6 months. But when Detective Stead placed the recordings on the table and read one specific line back to her, the original plan, she looked at Elliot. And in that moment, Elliot said, the performance ended, not with shouting, just gone, like a light switching off. Rowan was picked up the same afternoon at a hotel outside the county. I sat in Martin's office that evening and listened to the updates come in. Stead called, then Faye, then Elliot. When Elliot called, I could hear that he'd been crying, not from devastation, something more complicated than that. Relief and loss at the same time, the particular grief of someone who loved a person who wasn't real. It's done, he said. Are you okay? A pause. No, he said, but I will be. Can I come over? I already started the chili, I told him. The months that followed were not simple. The legal process moved at its own pace. Charges filed, hearings scheduled, attorneys filing motions and counter-motions. What Priya and Rowan had done was extensive and documented across multiple states, and the jurisdiction questions alone took time to untangle. The second family, from the man who had died, eventually came forward publicly. A civil suit was filed. The criminal proceedings would take longer. Elliot came back to himself slowly, the way people do after something like this. He went back to work. He started running again in the mornings, which he'd given up during the relationship. He came to dinner at Wren's house on a Sunday in March and sat at the table and ate 2 helpings and laughed at something his nephew said, and I watched him and felt something loosen in my chest that I hadn't realized had been clenched for months. He didn't talk about Priya much. When he did, he was matter-of-fact, processing it in the practical way he'd always handled hard things, looking straight at it, taking it apart, setting it aside. One evening in April, we were sitting on the back porch. The neighbor boy had been over earlier tending to Loretta's roses, and the yard smelled like cut grass and something sweet I didn't have a name for. Elliot had a beer, I had coffee. The sun was going down behind the tree line. I keep thinking I should have known, he said. You couldn't have. There were moments. He turned the bottle slowly in his hands. Small things, questions she'd asked that felt a little off. I told myself I was being too cautious. That's not your fault. I know I just. He stopped. I trusted her. You were supposed to, I said. That's how trust works. The failure wasn't yours. He looked at me sideways. When did you get philosophical? I've had a lot of quiet evenings to think. He nodded slowly. The birds were doing something noisy in the back maple. Somewhere down the street, someone was grilling. Can I tell you something? He said. Always, when you told me that night. All of it, the folder, the recording, part of me wanted to be angry at you. He looked at the yard. I know that sounds wrong, you were protecting me, but part of me was angry anyway. I know, and then I read the report. He paused. The second man, the one who died. He had a son about my age. He was quiet for a moment. I thought about that son, and what he must have felt knowing what happened and not being able to prove it, and I thought about what would have happened if you hadn't said anything. He looked at me. You were the only one who did. I didn't trust myself to speak for a moment. Your mother would have seen it faster, I finally said. Maybe, but you saw it. I looked out at the roses. They were going to need cutting back soon. Celeste Marrow sent me something last month, I said, the photographer. She was commissioned to do another event, and she overheard something that concerned her. Different situation, different family. She contacted the family. They were grateful. Elliot half smiled. She's going to be doing this for the rest of her career. Good, I said. Someone should. We held a small gathering in May. Not a party, more like an acknowledgement. Martin and his wife, Bax, Wren and her family. Faye Okafor, who came briefly and stayed for dinner, because Wren is the kind of person who won't take no for an answer. Detective Stead sent a note she couldn't attend, but that things were moving forward. Celeste came. She brought her camera, and I told her she didn't have to work. This was just dinner. She said she never really stopped seeing. I told her I understood. At some point in the evening, I found myself at the kitchen window, looking out at the backyard, and Elliot came and stood next to me and didn't say anything. We stood there for a while. I thought about the morning of my birthday, standing at my bedroom window making a quiet promise to myself. Enjoy today. Let your family celebrate you. I had done neither of those things. Not really. But I had done something else. Something that cost me sleep and comfort and weeks of pretending. Something that required me to look at my son across a dinner table and dismantle the thing he thought was saving him. People ask me now what I learned from all of it. The honest answer is simpler than they expect. Your instincts were given to you for a reason. The quiet unease that you explain away, the small inconsistency you dismiss because the alternative is uncomfortable, that thing deserves your attention, not paranoia, not suspicion as a default, but honest attention, the kind Loretta would have given it from the first moment. She would have read Priya in 10 minutes. I am certain of that. I'm slower, more willing to explain things away, more hopeful maybe, in ways that can be a weakness. But I got there. The hardware business turned 61 this fall. Elliot came in on a Tuesday to help me look at some books, the way he started doing every couple of months. We ate lunch in my office, which hasn't changed since 1987, except for the computer and the framed photo of Elliot and Wren as children that I moved from the house to the desk when Loretta died. He asked about a supplier contract. I told him what I thought. He pushed back. I listened. We figured it out together. Afterward, standing in the parking lot in the thin fall sunshine, he said, "Same time next month? I'll have the books ready," I told him. He nodded, got in his car, drove away. I stood there for a moment in the quiet. Then I went back inside and got to work.